In this video, I'm going to share with you some of the most revolutionary and exciting science in the fields of psychology and neuroscience, which will show you exactly what Albert Einstein was saying. Albert Einstein, long ago, said that imagination is more important than knowledge. It's really true that whatever imagination you have towards your future is actually the biggest thing driving who you are in the present. For over 100 years, psychologists actually believed that if you wanted to understand who a person was, why they were acting the way they were, all you had to do was understand their past. Put them on a couch, ask them questions about the past, and then you could know why a person's behaving the way they are. Well, what I love about Viktor Frankl, he wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning following World War II. He was one of the people who had to endure the Holocaust and be in the concentration camps. He was a Jewish psychiatrist. What Frankl believed, and he was very different from the psychologists at the time, is he actually believed it wasn't the past that was determining a person's psychology and their happiness and their motivation. It was actually their future. And what he would see and he would say over and over in Man's Search for Meaning was that the moment one of the fellow prisoners lost hope and faith in their future, then they were doomed and their physical body literally shut down and they ultimately died very quickly. So you actually need not only hope and vision for your future, but a meaning to fulfill in the future. Without some meaning and goal, specific goal in your future, then you can't really move forward. There's no point. And actually, Frankl himself talked about himself. His own goal was to escape the concentration camps so that he could rewrite one of his books and so that he could be reunited with his wife. So he had a very specific purpose. And he actually would quote over and over through Man's Search for Meaning, Nietzsche's quote, which says, when you have a why to live for, you can bear almost any how. So I'm going to actually share a few pictures that are going to depict a lot of where the science is going in psychology. There's some profound concepts in here. And if you can actually understand these, you'll realize why you're acting the way you are as a person. And you're going to be able to set and clarify bigger and better futures because it's actually your future that drives your present. So here's the first picture. And it's the idea that humans are not actually driven by their past. We're actually pulled forward by the future we're most committed to. So you have a future you're committed to. What is that future? Actually, one of the things that Dan Sullivan says is that the thing that makes people unique is the future that they're striving for. You have a different future that you believe is a great future than I have. You and I have completely different visions of what good future looks like. And we're both being driven by the future we're most committed to. Now, that's not being driven by the future we most want. It's the one we're most committed to. You may want to have $5 million. I may want a million different things, but it's the future you're most committed to. There's actually a great quote in the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership that commitment is a statement of what is. And I'm going to share with you what identity is in a minute, because your identity is really what you're most committed to, and it's connected to your view of the future. Everything you're doing right now is being driven by your view of the future and the future you're most committed to. So really, all behavior is goal-driven. Right now, you're watching this video because you wanted to click it and watch it. Today, you might be going to work, you might be going home, you might go to the gym, you might watch TV. All of those things are futures you're committed to. Me getting up, going to the bathroom, me going to the fridge, that's me getting up, going to a short-term future. So every behavior is actually driven by a goal. If I want to get up and go to the kitchen and grab something from the fridge, the first goal is me actually standing up. Stand up, walk to the kitchen, open the door. And this is a quote from Viktor Frankl. He actually said this very directly. It is a peculiarity of man that he can only live by looking to the future. We're all driven by our views of the future. The problem that most people face is that the future that they're facing is way too short term. They're dealing with immediate battles. They're dealing with what's urgent. Dwight D. Eisenhower, the former president, said, there's urgent and there's important. And most people are caught up in urgent battles or just short-term dopamine hits. For example, addicts are driven by an extremely short future. They just want that next high. And so that's the future that they're being driven for. You may be addicted to your smartphone, scrolling. Like people are just scrolling for the next dopamine hit, or going and getting the next caffeine hit. And so a lot of people are just driven by short-term dopamine that ends up costing their big-term future self. Or they're just dealing with immediate battles, the urgent things like getting to work, getting the kids to school, getting the kids to sports, whatever it is, getting to the weekend, watching the football game this weekend. Like there's a lot of immediate battles or short-term goals, short-term hits that make up most people's future. So most people's future is really close. They're not lifting their gaze 5, 10, 15, 20 years into the future and then beginning to invest and connect to a much bigger future self. Instead, most people's future is like a fire hose that's just coming straight at them. And they're just dealing with urgent. They're getting quick dopamine hit. And as a result, their future self, their bigger term future self is actually, this is kind of a way of costing your future self. It's putting your bigger term future self in debt. The more you seek short-term dopamine hits or just focus on the urgent and not the important, you're actually putting your future self in debt, because everything you do is either a cost to your future self, your bigger term future self. Every time you eat junk food over and over and over, if you've got bad habits, right, then it's going to ultimately shrink your longer term future. You're going to have a smaller view of your future self. And again, that view of your future self is going to be driving your behavior in the present. And so most people, because they're engaging in short-term futures, whether it's just short-term rewards and dopamine hits, or they're dealing with immediate battles, they're putting their future self, their longer term future self, deeper and deeper in debt. Think about someone, for example, who's not investing like financially in the stock market or in real estate or in crypto. If they're not investing, but they're more spending, or like our country, Ray Dalio actually just recently wrote a book all about the state of America and his concern about America, because as Americans, like as a culture, we keep going more and more in debt. We're also increasingly internally divided about what the future looks like. Peter Thiel, the billionaire who wrote the book 0 to 1, he talks about how there's different attitudes towards the future. One of the attitudes that really made America successful was what Peter Thiel calls definite optimism. That's a definite view of the future, a very clear, definite, specific view of the future, and you're optimistic towards that. He talked about how America is now shifting towards an indefinite optimism. That's an unhealthy place to be, but that's where you have a positive view of the future, but you don't know what it looks like. You're not definite about it. And if you're not definite about something, then you don't have conviction. You're just kind of wishy-washy, and you're actually conflicted about your goals. And I would actually say America has shifted, even since Peter Thiel wrote that book, to what he would call maybe an indefinite pessimism, where Americans are becoming increasingly pessimistic about the future of America, but we don't know what that is. We're indefinite about it, but it's starting to look bad. And that's where Europe has been for a long time. Europe has been indefinitely pessimistic about their future, where they believe the future is going to be worse, but they don't really have any definite attitude about what that worse is. They're just pessimistic about the future. Your view of the future really matters. You want to have a definite optimism towards your future. And actually, a definite optimism is more what psychologists would call hope. Hope is having a specific, definite goal, and then having the flexibility to commit to something specific, but then flexibly find new and better pathways to getting there. That's what Angela Duckworth would actually call maturity in her book, Grit. She says the more mature a person gets, the more they commit to longer and longer term goals, and then they become increasingly flexible at finding new and better pathways or processes to getting there. Here's just kind of a great way of looking at it. Your vision of your future is going to determine the results you get, irrespective of the amount of effort you put in. Actually, Grant Cardone talks about this in his book, The 10X Rule. He says that it takes just as much effort to make $10 million as it does to make 10,000. And I would actually say the more you apply certain principles, for example, Dan Sullivan has a concept he calls the free zone frontier. Free zone frontier is where you stop competing altogether. You stop believing in competition. Competition is actually an unhealthy belief towards life and towards nature and even towards evolution. All massive progress actually occurs through cooperation and collaboration. That's where the big jumps happen as a human species. But one of the things that Grant talks about in his book is, and he wrote this book, by the way, he wrote the 10X Rule back in, I believe, 2011, when he was about 52 years old. And he talks about how his biggest problem in his life was not his ambition. He was actually a really hard worker. He worked like a dog. He worked more hours a week than I would actually recommend. But his problem was that his goals were simply too small. And so if you have small goals, then you're going to generate small results, even if you're working 70, 80, 100 hours a week, because your efforts are all targeted toward an outcome. And when you upgrade your vision, that's actually what Grant did. In the last 10 years since he wrote that book, he 10x'd his goals. He actually made his goals much bigger, and the goal shapes the process. The process is only a byproduct of the goal. And actually, people like James Clear, who talk about how you should have no goals and that you should only focus on the process. James actually, when he was interviewed on Lewis Howes, he actually acknowledged, because James Clear said, what are 5 habits that you must have every day? And James said, well, I guess it depends on your goals. And so it's actually true that the goals drive even your process. The goals drive your habits. The goals drive what is actually a good habit and a good process. Because, for example, you could have the best process for weightlifting, but what if you actually want to become a world-class runner? Then that process is actually taking you away from the goal. Bigger vision leads to bigger results. And actually, the bigger your vision becomes, not only is it that you have a better, happier present, but also you can find easier and better ways to getting there. Back to Dan Sullivan, one of the things he talks about is getting a 10x jump in your freedom of time. Most people and entrepreneurs are working, let's just call it 50 to 80 hours a week. The biggest jump you could make is creating 10 times more free time. So as an example, I recently interviewed a guy named Scott Donnell, and he's someone whose net worth over the last 6 years has gone from 2 million to over 100 million, and he started multiple companies. The first jump he made, he was working in his company for 50 hours a week. The first thing he did was he started hiring really good people and giving more power to the people in his organization, and he went from 50 hours a week to 5. He started to have way more thinking time. He'd go skiing and think creatively. He'd really start learning from mentors. And immediately he saw ways where he could make massive jumps. And so one of the most important things you could do is actually pull yourself from the rat race, pull yourself from the hamster wheel of the urgent battles, and give yourself space to actually invest in your knowledge, your experiences, your flow. Actually, psychologists have a concept they call psychological detachment from work. And what this means is that as a society, we've actually become addicted to always working. One of the problems with that is because we have smartphones, and smartphones are actually bad for habit development. What the research shows about habits, and James Clear actually talks about this really brilliantly in his book, is that habits are best when associated with time and place. So for example, having a certain time when you go to bed in a certain place is really good for good sleep habits. If you put a TV in your room, that's actually a conflict of the habit of going to bed. Well, the problem with smartphones is that they have so many uses that they have conflicts. So you might just be literally reading a good book at home on your smartphone, and then you get a ding from your email, which brings you to the work frame of mind. And so there's so many conflicting uses with smartphones that they make it really hard to design smart habits around. But the thing about what psychologists have found with psychological detachment from work is that if people are constantly on, constantly thinking about work, or constantly available to work, then they're never actually recovering. They're never actually fully detaching from work. One of the things I love about what Steven Kotler talks about, he talks about this in both of his books, The Rise of Superman, which is kind of a breakdown of the science on flow, but he also talks about it in his new book, which is The Art of Impossible. He talks about the importance of active recovery. So Steven Kotler is a very prolific, productive writer, but 2 days a week, he actually alpine skis. He does this to create flow. It's one of his favorite activities, and he's just skiing. He's completely unplugged from all the stresses of life, and he's thrown himself down a mountain, as he would say, skiing, and it immediately generates flow. And how you do anything is how you do everything. And so because he's creating lots of recovery-based flow in his life, it becomes really easy to create flow in his writing. He's recovered. He's had a lot of time for refreshment, creativity. He's finding joy. As you create more joy outside of work and more recovery, more flow, it's so much easier to get flow when you're at work. And that's actually exactly what the psychologists have found on psychological detachment from work is that the more you detach and have creative breakthroughs and fun and recovery, and this is active recovery, it's not sitting on your phone staring at social media. It's like actually doing things that create massive flow, dopamine, happiness. It becomes so much easier to attach. And so one of the keys to having a bigger vision is actually working less. Get it down so that you're not working in your business, you're actually working on it. You pull yourself away. That's actually one of the things that Jim Rohn said. He said, if you want to make a living, you can work in your job. If you want to make a life, if you want to make an abundance, you've got to work on yourself. And so that's actually what Scott Donald did. He started working more on himself, on his collaborations, on his connections, on his thinking. And all of a sudden, over a short period of time, he almost 90x'd his net worth. Your vision of your future is the thing driving your present. I would challenge you very quickly to 10x your view of your future in key areas. Actually, Jim Collins talks about in the book, Good to Great, if you have more than 3 priorities, you have none. So you don't want to have a 10x future in 50 different directions. You actually want to clarify very specifically, what are the 3 areas of your life which absolutely matter most? For me, it's my family, it's my books, and it's my net worth, or it's just really my cash confidence, my cash as a person. Actually, that's another one of the things that Dan Sullivan talks about. He talks about it in his book, Total Cash Confidence, which you can actually download literally for free on the Strategic Coach website. But your confidence about money has nothing to do with a certain number of money. A lot of people think once I hit 10 million, I'll be confident. That's not true. It actually creates a very unhealthy cycle because once you get to your number, you won't feel confident. You'll see other stresses. The only way you can feel confident about your future is that you have complete confidence that you can help increase the value of other people's futures. That's actually what business is increasing the value that other people have in their own future. And if you can create increasing value in other people's futures and specific people's futures, and you can collaborate more and more with better people, more teamwork in your life, then your confidence towards your future becomes increasingly massive. It can be 10x, 100x. And the nice part is it's increasingly easy because you have better time, but also you're focused on less and less. You simplify what you do rather than you doing everything. You actually only do the few things that bring you joy, fascination, and confidence. For me, it's writing books. And so for me, going 10x or 100x is not about writing more and more books. It's actually about writing books with higher level collaborators where my specific skill set can take them and their business 100 times. And that's actually what me and Dan Sullivan have done. We have a collaboration. We've written Gap and Gain and Who Not How. And by the way, right down below on this video, you can actually get the free Kindle version of the Gap and the Gain. I actually paid for multiple Kindles. And so if you just put your name, or actually it's just your email, you'll get the full Kindle version of the Gap and the Gain. Also, if you're enjoying this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel if you want more science on your future self and more literal strategies for going 10x and 100x in the specific areas that you want. So I'm going to continue with the pictures. This is what Dr. Hal Hershfield has found. He's found that if you're not connected with your bigger picture future self, then you're going to make dumb decisions in the present. So that makes total sense. That your quality of decision-making in the present is based on your connection to and your clarity of a specific future self. If you've got a specific, measurable, exciting, prioritized future self, then you can actually do quality things in the present. It's the same on a daily basis. If you have way too many competing priorities, like a to-do list of 10 items, then you're torn in too many different directions. Or if you have no goals at all for the day, specifically for the day, then you're going to make really short-sighted decisions. You're going to be caught up in the urgent or the short-term dopamine hits. And actually, what the research on flow shows is that you actually need specific goals to have flow. Goals actually create constraints so that you can actually know what to focus on. And I would recommend no more than 3 goals for each day, or no more than 3 to-dos. And those should be important, not urgent. Those should be things that are leading towards your bigger picture future self. Hopefully this helps. I have so many other things I want to show you, but I'll do it in another video. My name is Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Hope you found this video enjoyable. Please grab the copy of the Gap and the Gain down below. Just put your email in and we'll send you a free Kindle copy. Have a good day.